Hey, my name is Tomás Morín. Welcome to San Marcos, Texas. We are just south of Austin. This is one of my favorite spots in town, mostly because of the basketball court there. It's in between some tracks. You might hear a train coming by in a bit, and the San Marcos River, which is just on that side, and beyond that is Texas State University. Welcome to my little corner of Texas. I'm gonna read a couple poems. The first one has a Latin title, Carità Americana. I found regret in a deli case. It was white and shaped like a brick. On the label, a cow from Vermont gazed on forget-me-nots or drank from a pond. I can't remember which, since it was the black splatters or was it white splotches I was taken with, and the thin legs, and the elegant body shaped like a tank. Although, what I remember most is the missing udder, that pink fist of gravity every Holstein swings, whose absence could have been intended because the artist hoped liberating his cows from the bondage of breasts, an act of charity, no doubt, though not Roman, Hindu, maybe, would impress the feminist he was dating, who was head over heels for vegan babka. The meat cutter offered me a taste, because he saw how I kept staring longingly in his case, as if I were starving, at that blessed cow without nipples, drawn by a lovesick artist in Jersey, who wanted me to believe it gave the milk that made the immaculate cheese now sitting in my hand, whose taste I already knew well, even though I played the naif, even though I knew better, that after I had chewed the last bite of that sacred square, in 2 minutes' time, maybe less, I would begin expanding, but not with the Holy Ghost, with lactose in the small intestine, so that by the time I reached my car, I'd be ready for the fiddle, because I would look like one of the demented Roman emperors, the ones that were all paunch and wild eyes, and who had a taste for fire. To the young meat cutter, waiting for my answer, for 5 o'clock, for an escape from the madness of fluorescent lighting, I wanted to say thou, wanted to be formal. Not because it rhymed with cow. It was that magical beast, after all, that joined us. But because we were beyond the quotidian now, and biblical time is archaic, and thus it would only be proper to say, thou, slicer, thou, priest of the cold cut, who set me on the path of suffering with an act of charity. Do you know your Vermeer, your Caravaggio and Rubens, and thus the story of Piero and Simone, and how the one, the grown child, fed the other, her jailed father, in secret, with the milk of her body, so that he wouldn't die as had been decreed, from want, from lack of food and drink, and how when all was discovered, the father was released, and the daughter's gift was named Carità Romana. I mumble, thou, and then, no thanks, because I'm already late to visit my father in the hospital, in his cold room, which, in another country, one thick with forests and secrets, with caves to hide in from the authorities, would be for enemies of the state. He's a prisoner of his body. His hunger is vulgar, beastly even, but unlike Piero, there's no milk in my chest, which I would let him cleave and suckle anyway, but for the bitterness swimming there. He looks almost Roman now, with his buzzed head and marching veins. For all his brio, he'll never teach another son how to steal corn by moonlight, just enough to eat and sell, or how to build a house, or how to read the soot marks on any brick from the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. When he wakes and adds his lowing baritone to the shrieks and trills of his neighbors down the hall, I clear my throat and do my best cowbird and watch his face cloud with yearning, a naked shyness, like the kind a calf wears when it's startled by your voice, and it drops its mother's nipple to stare at you, milk still hot on its tongue. His sweet cow face is almost enough for me to forget the old injuries, how he laughed every time I retched in the bathroom because of the butter he hid in my food. No, I can't lie and tell him what he wants to hear, will not say that I love him, will not admit to that. Instead, I'll wash his hair and clip his nails, shave his face, and when my traitorous lip trembles with pity, I'll whistle louder, longer, and teach him about regret, feed it to him one note at a time, and though he knows he shouldn't, he'll devour it, with the knowledge that my song will swell and split his heart. The second poem I'm going to read is American Valentine. When a flag is wounded, worn, or simply unwanted, and its owner can't burn it, or won't, it arrives in the dead flag office, where a man too young to look so old logs it, but not before he buries his nose in the stars and stripes, as he's done with every flag he's ever carefully pulled out of its envelope, as if it were a love note. And at first the sniffing was a game, this nasal immersion, as his doctor called it, a game to identify a flag's home by its smell. Citrus was Florida or California, while salt and fish could be New England, and so on. Only recently the game became a ritual, as so many games do, because this man with the forgettable face and nimble hands, this lover of Marvin Gaye and Sinatra and anyone who ever sang of loving love, hadn't left the portable building that is the dead flag office in 5 years, and so his parsing of the subtle odors, masked by the native scent of each region, became a way to know the history of each flag's family. Greece was bowls of fried chicken and asparagus on Sundays, while exhaust and hot dogs were a bank on a busy street corner. And moths were always a soldier, with no one left to air the 3-point keepsake his memory had soured in. When a flag arrived carrying the light scent of petunia and sap and wind, heavy with pine, he knew this was the flag from his porch, the one that had flown on a cruiser in the Pacific during the war. Knew he had to leave, had to go home, and because his clothes had long since turned to rags, he dismantled what he loved best. But since he couldn't sew, his new red, white, and blue clothes had no real shape to speak of, nor did his pants have hems, nor his sleeves cuffs, and so long were they that his hands were not visible. And so it was in this way he stepped into the chill of a late afternoon in fall, and walked once more the 8 blocks through the old neighborhood, down the streets where he had been called Old Gory, and Betsy Ross, had been mocked as the Dork of July, every month of the year until the day the courage to cross the door of his office had died. The sun was gone now, behind the hills, so he walked faster, ignoring the questions of his neighbors, the shocked faces of those who had given him up for dead. Faster and farther, his feet bruised, he ran up the sidewalk and onto the pile of rubble where his house had once been, and stood there, looking like a cut-out heart, a wild thing panting on a bed of ice for a new dark to wrap it up again. Thanks again, and if you ever come to Texas, be sure to visit San Marcos.